Now I've got chips on my teeth. No, I'm sorry. Anyways, thank you so much for the introduction, Lorenzo. I think it's really important that we remember, yes, that we can't give up on our elections, because a lot of times people get a little bit cynical and they decide that it's not worth going to the ballot. You know, they give up. And you can never give up, because that's what the elite want. They want us, the civilians, the citizens, the average Joes, to just ignore the process altogether so they win. They want low voter participation. And even though it sometimes feels like you have to vote for the lesser of two evils between the Dems or the the Dems or the Republicans. No, let's not make a fuss about that. The thing is, you can't ever give up, because the fact that Obama was able to somewhat in the last year, it would have been better if he'd done it early on, but it's true, it's very difficult to do any of these things. But he did go to Cuba. He did make it easier for American tourists to exercise their freedom of movement. All of these things, they used to be extremely radical, but they're becoming more mainstream on the streets where real people are talking. Because the problem that we have in South Florida is that the majority of us, we think a certain way, yet the minority political elites, they continue to operate in their own selfish way. They make a lot of noise, and they pull very unpopular stunts, like this one, like the recent hostility towards Cuban families, because they're complacent, because they're comfortable, and they assume that we're not going to do anything about it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to run was because the list is very long. There are many issues that need to be fixed. One of the reasons is that as a Cuban American, I am sick and tired of being tossed around as part of a Cuban family. A cliche sometimes. I've been told that my family and I, that we're just like the classic caricature of a Cuban family, because I am the daughter of a political prisoner in Cuba, and we came here with nothing. We had our small family of four in 1994. We had in our possession a couple of pennies, nickels. We were forced to leave those at the Havana airport. But we believe that Cuban families should no longer be tossed around between the two parties of the moment for electoral purposes. It is wrong, and it is stupid as well, because a lot of times we talk about the emotional, the humane reason, but no, the math, if you look at it, we are affecting the South Florida economy. The last war in Iraq cost us around, with Bush, cost us around $3 trillion. If we had used that money to invest, for instance, in our infrastructure, we would have created decent jobs. And that's the problem from an American perspective, if we don't bear in mind, obviously, the humane reasons and the big bleeding liberal heart reasons, right? If we look at it from a pragmatic and smart point of view of balancing the budget, we're bleeding money, and we're only doing one thing in terms of the foreign policy, creating more and more enemies. So it's insane to continue a habit, a governing habit that doesn't benefit neither the people that we invade, because yes, with Cuba, we haven't had any physical military presence, but the hostility in terms of the rhetoric, it amounts to the same thing. And we all know that wars start with words at one point. And the embargo is punishing Cuba. And if we sanction so many countries, like Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, all these countries, if we continue to sanction the countries that just don't want to bow down and adopt a different economic and political model, we're eventually sanctioning ourselves. We're refusing to do business with them. I thought we believed in free markets. I thought it was the smart capitalist thing to try and invade other markets. What, we don't want to do business with Cuba? All right, if you get yourself out of the picture, China and Russia are going to take over. So I think that if we wanted to continue being the world superpower, to try and do good, I think it makes a lot of sense to rethink the strategies of regime change. Regime change does not work. And if enough people hear our message, they will go out and vote, because it's not that we don't have the numbers. We are the majority, because this is common sense. We're creating enemies afar. South American people can see right through these policies, and we are alienating ourselves, creating enemies everywhere, just wasting taxpayer dollars in, for instance, funding a propaganda machinery from the Cold War. We have Radio and TV Marti that recently a couple of the same people as always, Rubio, Rick Scott, Ballard, they're trying to save it when that needs to be at least reformed. Radio and TV Marti needs to turn, if we're going to continue to fund that, because it's our taxes that's funding this, if they want to continue to exist in District 25, then they better get with the program and actually do some journalistic work, not propaganda. Propaganda that I continue to insist throughout the ages is violating American laws, because we cannot have a propaganda machinery influencing American citizens. And they do this by buying local paid programming spaces. We shouldn't be able to access their website, and they shouldn't be advocating and supporting internal candidates. Radio and TV Marti they recently lost their director, and they've had to throw out a couple of these journalists because they were engaging in anti-Semitism. And they create these editorial pages saying that, oh, Bernie's a socialist and AOC, the socialists are taking over America. Well, you can say all you want. You can have those opinions, sure, but you better do it as a private entity. You can't do that as a public entity influencing American voters in South Florida. And so to sum it up, because yes, I was just issued the Time letter. Just yesterday, we were having, as a family, a conversation through social media to a family member of ours in Cuba. And one of the reasons why I wanted to wear these pearl earrings, not an ode to the 80s, but because they were given to me by a family member in Cuba who yesterday very explicitly said that people are dying. It's not that, oh, they're gonna maybe be pressured into desperation as the original purpose of the embargo. People are literally dying in Cuba. And it's through the most absurd ways. Through either loss of penicillin, access to antibiotics, the simplest 19th century medicine, it's missing. So this isn't going to bring about a regime change. We're not going to be able to install a neoliberal society there according to our political elite's wishes through this method. This will only harm the Cuban civil society, because it gives another reason for the Cuban government to say, well, you look at America. Do you understand why we can't let you have access to all these things? We play into the thing. And if we can at least go back to the Obama era, where there was the chance that through diplomacy we could give peace a chance, then I think that's the path to go. I think that's the path to something that's humane, it's smart, and it makes sense, and it'll be more representative of the majority of Cubans and non-Cubans here in South Florida.